Hey everyone, thank you for tuning in. This is my first video ever and I'd like to introduce myself at first. I'm a 22-year-old full-time software engineer who creates games in his free time. I've actually been programming since 2016 and creating games in Unity since 2020. 2 years later, after a couple of game jam projects and one bigger release, I now decided to start a devlog series to document the journey and especially the progress of my first commercial game dev project. Because devlogs are a great way to gather useful feedback and ideas while developing, you can also connect to like-minded people, which results in a very cool dynamic. So there are really just advantages to it. This video acts as a rough sum up of my initial thoughts and plans. I already got actual footage to show, but I want to logically split different topics up, with this one being the introduction of this project. But what kind of game do you want to create? You might ask. Great question, but to answer that question, I'd like to take a short flashback into my past, especially into my kid and teen years. Gaming was a fundamental part of my life when I was a kid already. I got my first gaming console when I was around 6. Of course, being a very big Star Wars fan led me into the very first Star Wars Battlefront title, the 2005 version. I loved the freedom of walking around in an open map, focusing certain objectives, driving different vehicles or playing different classes. I especially liked the camera setup with it being placed right behind you. You were able to permanently see your character, which made me feel like I was watching a movie with me taking control of it. The internet was still a new thing back then, and so I actually didn't hear about the second Star Wars Battlefront title and only started playing it long after it was released. This game undoubtedly made my kid years. The gameplay improvements to the first title, the amount of maps and depth and the campaign, this game felt like a worthy sequel. A couple of years later, I heard about another Star Wars game that was a bit more rough, Star Wars Republic Commando. And oh dear, I can confidently say that this is the best Star Wars game I've ever played. You basically got into the role of a captain of a special clone trooper squad and had to execute different missions between the second and the third Star Wars episode. The game was much different because once you take away lightsabers, droids become an actual threat. It was so refreshing to see the war from a clone's perspective. The squad is your weapon. Literally was written on the game's cover and this perfectly describes it. The game was a more or less classical ego shooter with a twist of your teammates. You could assign certain tasks to your brothers. Mount this cannon, use that back to tank, breach that door, target this enemy. They did whatever you ordered. And I really liked that, being in charge, carrying an artificial responsibility. But enough of the praise now. When I became even older, I slipped down the road of the bloody zombie mayhem of the Resident Evil franchise. It started out with Resident Evil 5, then Resident Evil 4, Resident Evil Operation Raccoon City, and eventually Resident Evil 6. I enjoyed every single one of them and I really liked the third-person camera perspective which was originally introduced in Resident Evil 4. And with the upcoming remake of Resident Evil 4, an old love is somewhat reignited. Many people say that Resident Evil 4 is a perfect game, and I really can't blame them. You might already be able to predict where this is going. To answer the question from the beginning, I want to create a hybrid of both games I just mentioned. A third-person shooter where you command a squad and fight zombies and other various monsters. Sounds pretty flat, right? But looking at the market, there isn't too much to play right now if you want the over-the-shoulder perspective and zombies at once, aside from the Resident Evil franchise. The upcoming Dead Space remake and the Callisto Protocol rather cure the itch of an action horror genre, whereas my game should be a bit more on the action side. Let me be a bit more specific. You play the captain of a special operations unit consisting of 4 members in the modern time era and have to infiltrate a mysterious facility. On the way in, you realize that something evil has happened in that facility and have to make your way through it to fulfill your mission. You can shoot loot, craft, and most importantly, give your teammates commands on how they should act and what they should do. The art style will be on a simpler side in a low poly style. I am intending to make use of most Cinti assets since they offer a great amount of content. This is especially handy since I am going to create this whole game on my own. Even though the game will look low poly, I don't want it to look flat. I'm choosing Unity and its HDRP render pipeline to create this vision. This allows me to create realistic looking visual effects and lighting, which I plan to mix with the low poly style of the models and assets. I also plan the game to have a fixed set of levels which tell a story and eventually end the game, just like Resident Evil 4 for example. I also have some ideas for game modes beside the main story, but this is way too far in the future. First things first. With the rough shape of the game in my head, I set myself some rules or goals for the time of development to maintain a healthy experience. I created these rules based on the many GDC talks I watched and obviously personal experience in past projects. Implement content directly so it only needs to be adjusted later on. This means I don't want to implement big loads of placeholders or any kind of prototypal objects that have to be completely redone or re-implemented later on. Of course, some things most likely have to be redone at a later point, but I want to embrace the progress by just adding stuff that I already have a clear picture of in my mind instead of putting in a dummy to see how it looks. Make use of great assets. While Unity offers a lot to work and make progress with, most of the features aren't production ready in my opinion. This means you either have to code it yourself or fall back to third-party assets. And that's exactly what I want to do in this project. Using assets saves me time, and saving time means saving money. Looking at the project on a bigger scale. I plan to publish this game eventually on platforms like Steam, and I should code it accordingly. I always need to have things like input rebinding, localization, game settings, and persistence in mind. Hardcoding anything will just eat up my time later on, which is why creating a code base that is abstract and modular is another important goal to prevent headaches. No day without an increment. Developing a game on your own can and will be exhausting. There will be days that I really can't look at the Unity editor. But even then, I want to do at least something, even if it's just tweaking a value. A great help for this is splitting tasks down into more tiny and digestible tasks. I also won't be afraid of taking a week off game dev to recharge my batteries. Having fun and learning new things, this goes hand in hand with the specific hobby. I wouldn't do it if I didn't enjoy it. Now, for the last part, I want to show you some very early gameplay of the game I just tried to describe. It's a very early look of the current prototype and there isn't much in it yet. I will go into technical details in the next episodes, so stay tuned for that. Alright, I think this wraps up my first video. Thank you for making it this far into it. Let me know what you think and feel free to write any ideas or feedback in the comments. Make sure to subscribe to my channel and hit the like button. You can also take a look at my socials and hit the bell to stay updated about this project. Have a nice day and don't spill your beer.